first and foremost, like just how are you? How are you doing during this time? And what's that looking like for you these days?
I'm really good. I think that perspective is important. And I think that, for anybody who is a creative entrepreneur, the first thing you start thinking when there's a big change is, how do I structure myself within this new dynamic? And I think that that can be a lot of things. Different people respond differently. For me, I need space, creative space. And so I took some quiet time to myself to just sort of examine, what does this mean for me? What does this mean as a business, as a brand? What does this mean to my clients and customers? And as I made that evaluation, I realized that, one of the biggest things that we promote is psychological first aid and self care. And so, I try to implement those things in my personal life. And I really saw this as an opportunity to scale back, to be focused on what's important, to look at core values. And so it has been a time of transition, certainly. Nobody does that perfectly or instantaneously, but it has been a number of weeks of really being focused on my family and focused on priorities and, maybe a new look at how I can integrate my business into my family and my family into my business. And so, yeah, it's been just really good development time for everything. And I think, every entrepreneur has some grounding time. And again, everybody does it differently. Some people do it daily, some people do it weekly, some people do it seasonally. But I do really relish those sort of anniversaries and times when you can look at where you've been, where you're at, and where you're going. And if those things are congruent with what resonates with you and so on. So this has been just a really good time of sort of percolating and solidifying those things that I know ring true for me. And I think, as somebody who feels I'm a big part of the personal brand that we offer, I think that's important, to be grounded, to know where you're going, and to sort of be allowed to call people into that, to come alongside you for that journey.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's such good perspective to have during a time like this. One thing that really stuck out to me, and I'm hearing this quite a bit in conversations that I'm having, is having the opportunity to kind of take a step back, reflect on your business, where you've come to, and how you want things to look moving forward. I find for myself, I've had an opportunity to get clarity on quite a few things actually in this time of kind of taking a step back. We're still, super busy, but being able to take a step back on certain things, reflect, and say, maybe this is a change I'd like to make moving forward. Have you had, that experience? And is there anything that you would, reflect on and say, hey, maybe I can change this, or maybe I want to go in this direction?
Hmm. I think that communication is so important as a business. And there are certain things that we as individuals pick up as means of communication. But I think if you are trying to communicate a brand, especially in our case, we primarily deliver first aid education. And I think there are some stigmas there. And we've spent a lot of time overcoming those stigmas and helping people to understand that there might be another way, and to really enjoy the content, and to benefit from it, and to, yeah, just enjoy what's there. And so I think that part of that evaluation is, how can I communicate better? So maybe the go-tos are, communication through social or communication verbally. But sometimes it's about communicating something that's deeper, and that takes connection. And so that connection can happen through various means. And I've been sort of thinking about who I am, and um, how I can use that to communicate better with my audiences and with the individuals that I participate in training with. And so I've been considering, I'm quite a creative person and I do some art sort of secretly. I'm a closet artist, if you will. And
Nice.
I don't often get the opportunity to share that. And so I've been really sort of mulling over how I can share more of that as a means to communicate those deeper things that I'd really like to help my audience identify with.
Wow, wow. And you just uncovered something there that is like, I think it's a game changer for business in general. Like unlocking, like bringing to the surface that thing that makes you you, and then not being afraid to share that in the business community or internally with your team or what have you. And I don't see a whole lot of it, but when you see it, it's evident. It's
Hmm.
like, wow, they really have like a special way of communicating that. How long has that been brewing? Like, is that something that's been recent or for a while or?
I think, in my first year of business, I really had a vision for brand, but my brand was not attached to who I am. And I was sort of hesitant to link the two. I felt like branding needed to be strong and it needed to be clear and it needed to be consistent, but I didn't necessarily think it had to be me. It could be anybody behind that brand for all the customer knew. But sort of as I grew in my business, by year two I recognized that a big reason that my consumers were interested in my brand was me. And so it feels a little like tooting your own horn when you first sort of grasp that concept of being a personal brand. And so that's uncomfortable for some. I'm not narcissistic in a way that sort of breeds that naturally. But as I became comfortable with the idea, when I knew and understood why my business was different beyond our operational differences, that a lot of it had to do with my experience as a paramedic, with my experiences growing up, with some of my belief systems that fuel sort of a real deep need for integrity and empathy and these sort of core values that come out in our business. And so knowing that that's where people are connecting, I've become over time more vocal about those things and more comfortable with communicating it. So I'm always thinking about how do I do this in a way that brings value to the consumer? Because it's certainly, I think there is a certain pat on the back or a certain stroking of your ego that you can achieve as a personal brand. And that's not really what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is how do I add value for my consumer? How do I connect with them in a way that's real? How do I become vulnerable so that they feel safe to be vulnerable? These types of things. So I think it's always brewing, to answer your question, Josh. I think it's always in the back of my mind somewhere, with each part of our business. How do I make this more congruent with who I am? How do I make this more connected in both directions to my audience and to myself and so on?
That's fantastic. Wow. And what you just said, like really embody, like the word that comes to my mind when you said what you said was creating an experience. Like you're sharing yourself, the piece of yourself that makes your brand you. That like creates an experience for a customer that only you can really provide because it's you, it's your brand, you are the brand. So I just think that's phenomenal that you've unlocked that and you're going like deep there.
Mm-hmm. I think there's positives and negatives to it, right? As a business that's growing, I sometimes start to think, okay, well, at what point do I um, how do I diversify this? Like, it's great to be the face of a brand. It's great to implement these core values and so on. But what happens as we grow and I'm not the only individual who's delivering content? And as so I do have other instructors who are in the classroom now and so on. But it is a challenge, I think, in this growth phase. I'm still very new as a business, but we're sort of at that precipice, at that sort of crossroads where you can choose to stay small or you can continue to grow. And so, yeah, I think you have to have both perspectives all the time. You have to hold things loosely. You have to definitely be willing to adjust. Um, it's good to have strong branding, but that definitely is something that grows with your company.
Which one do you want to do? Do you want to like stay where you are as far as size, or are you looking to grow?
Oh no, I'm very growth oriented. I don't think we'll franchise at any time. That's not my vision. But about a year ago, we started offering public training in various cities surrounding us. And then as we took that on, then we started taking on training across southeastern Ontario. So, I mean, we're set up well to be offering training province wide and to continue to grow in that fashion. I think there's something that um, there's a certain type of entrepreneur, right, where there has to be growth in one way or another. You either grow your business or you grow yourself. And so some people become serial entrepreneurs and
Hmm.
some people just grow their business. Some people do both. I think it's good if you can do both. But I think that's the determination. I think it would be rare to find a business that wasn't scalable. I think it has to do with the entrepreneur. Are you scalable as an individual? Can you take on what it takes to scale your business? What does that look like for you? And so at this stage of life for me, I look at my capacity and I say, okay, what does my capacity allow for? Can I build more capacity? What does that look like? Because to me, if you're not going to do it well, it's not worth doing. So I can push my capacity limits, but then my business wouldn't function well.
Wow, you coined a phrase very eloquently. You said, you can either grow your business or you can grow yourself.
Mm.
And so like break that down. Like what does that what's the difference for you?
Mm. Well, I mean, I think that that means a couple of different things. I mean, as a business, if you wanted to continue to grow yourself, there are a lot of facets where you continue to build who you are, and that builds your brand and builds your business, and and so when you're talking about scaling, you're scaling something internally as opposed to scaling something to franchises or scaling something to multiple businesses or I think we all grow ourselves. I think it's an integral part of being an entrepreneur. If you're not growth oriented, it certainly hinders business growth. But yeah, I mean, grow yourself is something that uh, your time and efforts have to be prioritized no matter what. Not everything can be given the same priority. And so for a season, you may choose to spend time growing yourself in preparation for growing your business or moving in another direction or those types of things.
Awesome. So true. So true. Um, I'm so curious to like unpack this with you, and it's around the conversation we had last time around like just entrepreneurial spirit and just sheer pure entrepreneurship. What does that mean to you?
Well, last time, Josh, I really thought, okay, like I think some things are super clear to you individually, but then when you go to articulate them to someone else, you think, oh, how would I like package that in a way that really, helps articulate what I would say? And So I did some sort of, have you done those sort of idea webs, or you do some balloons and sort of branch out from there?
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm a very creative person, as I mentioned. And so I'm very visual. I like to visualize these things as I process them sometimes. So I, just took some notebook paper and wrote down some of the qualities that I thought were really imperative to being an entrepreneur, and sort of connected some ideas to those and why I think they're so deeply imperative. And what I really came out with was, I think there's probably, three types of entrepreneurs. There's probably entrepreneurs who come into their business, um, like the idea of business, but run their business more like a job, right? They might be satisfied with the size of their business. They're not concerned so much with scaling. They hire people to manage their business, so they enjoy having a business, but not necessarily the active process of building a business. So this might be somebody who is a reseller. It might be somebody who purchases an already formed business, or somebody who's inherited a business, these types of things. And then I think there is this sort of middle of the road entrepreneur, somebody who is creative, somebody who likes to build business, somebody who is, always sort of thinking about the next idea, but they maybe have a moderate amount of energy to give to it. And so capacity might limit the amount of growth that they have. And so that capacity could be financial, it could be personal energy levels, it could be knowledge level, there could be a number of things limiting capacity. And I think the third type of entrepreneur is, like the Gary V, right? These entrepreneurs who are larger than life, very high energy, high capacity. They're able to build capacity effectively. And so you see, individuals who get into multiple franchises, serial entrepreneurs, people who are willing to put aside large pieces of their personal life in order to grow something. Pat Bet David, who really believes in building jobs for people, and building something that scales for them as well, those types of things. And so I think, regardless of what type of entrepreneur you are, whether you fall into one category or another, I think there are still sort of core values within that. I think, sort of, um, skill sets, things that are really ingrained in people. I'm not somebody who really believes that you're necessarily born an entrepreneur, but I think you're probably somebody who's born with a lot of the components that could make an entrepreneur. And so, some of them might come up, might start with, being a very overcoming personality, somebody who's got a lot of grit, starting a business, taking over a business, right? There's a lot of things that are big challenges, big hurdles, whether they're to, your ego or from customers who are disgruntled, trying to change the mind of the consumer. There's a lot of things that really cause you to dig in. And I think too, as an entrepreneur, there are times that you have nothing left to give, but you're the only one to give it. And so you dig deep, right? You pull up your bootstraps and away you go.
Yeah.
I do think that people who are entrepreneurs, they express that different ways. Some people are quietly overcoming, and some people are more loud about it. But I think it really is, if you don't have grit, it's very difficult to succeed, I think, in business. Um, I think being a risk taker, and certainly someone who can assess risk. This is something that I've been kind of exploring, because I wouldn't necessarily like go out there and label myself as a risk taker, you know. Although throughout my life, in high school, they make you take those personality tests and things. I always scored very high as an extrovert, and as somebody who was a thrill seeker and these types of things. And I'm much calmer, maybe, in my older years now, but I think I would still score the same on those tests. And I've been having conversations with my husband about risk assessment and how well we complement each other in our risk assessments. He is one who assesses risks, and it takes him a very long time to consider taking a risk, if he'll take it at all. And as an entrepreneur, I'm almost always willing to take the risk. I think sometimes you have to risk a lot for big benefit. One of the sayings that is frequent in our family is you got to spend money to make money sometimes. And so there are people who would be fearful about that and might not take a chance or take an opportunity. But a lot of business is that. How big is this risk? Am I willing to accept the consequences if it doesn't go well? How can I take this risk to get the benefit? Because the benefit can be exponential, right? I talked about creativity. So much of business is really, I think, looking at a new angle of something or building something that doesn't exist or trying to find a solution, and that takes creativity, and so that can come out in a lot of different ways, right? Some people it's product development, some people it's creative communication, so many things, but definitely creativity is like a pillar, I think, in the entrepreneurial world. How about you? Do you think that there are specific core values of an entrepreneur?
I definitely think there are specific things that make an entrepreneur an entrepreneur. My thoughts around that is that if you're like, and just to kind of like talk about, go to where you were talking about the different types of entrepreneurs, like, like the one that maybe took over a family business versus somebody that like started something from scratch. Are those two individuals any different? Yes, definitely. Are they both entrepreneurs? Yes, definitely. And that's why, I wanted to kind of dig deep and thank you. That was like a really, really good explanation of like your thought process around pure entrepreneurship, because to me, that is like the person that is, it's not really like they're getting into it as a I don't know, as like a duty. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's like this is something I have to do. Like I think it's like it like, and to some degree, like some people like they do get into it as a necessity and they thrive. I think there's the difference is like is having to do it and wanting to do it. I think there's people that to some degree it's both. They have to do it, it's a necessity, but they also want it. Like that's the like another route wouldn't bode well for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I kind of see it is like with pure entrepreneurship, it's like that's like it's an intentional choice. It's
Mm-hmm.
an intentional choice, and you want to maximize all the angles you can within that choice. And it's not something that I'm just going to get through this and retire. Like you enjoy the ride, you enjoy the process, you enjoy the moments, the self development. To me, that's like pure, like entrepreneurship at its purest. And again, one man's opinion, because everybody's going to have a different take, and it doesn't mean that somebody else's take is wrong. That's just my take on it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm a pretty analytical person about myself and about pretty much everything, but but I'm somewhat introspective. Like I often say, well, what makes me tick? Or, if I do have this opinion, where does it actually come from? If I have this gut feeling, why? Uh, and so I think, early on in my journey as an entrepreneur, I saw my husband in his job acting as an entrepreneur. And so I started really kind of digging into that and was like, okay, does every entrepreneur have a business, run a business? Like, what is entrepreneurship? Because we often attach it to that, right? Like, you have to have this business you're working on to be an entrepreneur. But what I really realized in watching him, I mean, he's very entrepreneurial, but he has some very opposite traits to me. I'm very extroverted. He's very introverted. I'm the risk assessor and the risk taker. He's the risk assessor and maybe not the risk taker. Like these kind of sort of drastic opposites. And yet, he is someone who builds and innovates and solves problems and manages and leads. And so I see that there are these entrepreneurs who, some of them are in jobs, some of them do run businesses, but in a much quieter fashion. And I think I mentioned this the last time we talked, right? If you're the Gary V entrepreneur, you are loud and you're on social and you're high energy and people gravitate toward that energy. And so that maybe gets a louder voice sometimes. And certainly people are excited and motivated by it. And so I resonate with that because I'm an excited person. I'm an extrovert. That connects for me. And so I think early in my entrepreneur journey, not that it's been all that long, but I think early on, I really connected to that idea. And it resonated with who I was, and so I wanted to say, yeah, that's an entrepreneur, right? And I think
Yeah.
over the last couple of years, I've recognized that there's entrepreneurship in so many different personality types. So it comes out, it's expressed differently, but that those core values, I think, are really the same. Like I talked about, overcoming and taking risks and innovation and creativity. Certainly there are some of those core values that I think make an excellent entrepreneur, right? We could talk about the entrepreneur versus like the highly successful entrepreneur who might really exceed at things like humility. I think that those are important defining factors. But I think when you talk about a pure expression of an entrepreneur, there might be some sort of pillars that might fall within the entrepreneurs. And you probably I wonder if other entrepreneurs think this way, but do you look back on your life and see yourself, as a child and going through school and so on, and see entrepreneurial sort of thought processes?
Yeah, like I would say that probably started like I don't know, I think I was like 9 and I was watching an episode of Arthur, and like Buster went and was like shoveling driveways, and I literally got off my butt, turned off the TV, and walked through like every street in my neighborhood, knocking on doors, saying, "Hey, can I shovel your driveway for like $10?"
That's
Literally.
awesome. I love that story. Because I think, again, like the Gary Vee thing, right? Like people are attracted to this guy who tells stories about starting businesses when he was, I don't know how old he was, but like 9 years old selling sports cards, right? And he talks to individuals on his podcast and so on who talk about, oh yeah, I ran 15 mini businesses or seasonal businesses by the time I was 20, and these types of things. But I, again, like I don't think you have to run a business to express those things. When I was a kid, I saw some, I don't know, public service announcement or some kind of world hunger thing. I don't remember what it was, but it was for somebody who was raising money for leprosy. And I went to school with like a sign up sheet and went to my principal and said, like, I want to go to every classroom and I want to explain to everybody what the problem is, how we can be a part of the solution, and I want to raise money for this thing.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
think I was probably in grade 3. Uh, but
That's
I was
awesome.
just like, I have passion for a cause. I will seek a solution and figure out how to make this bigger than me, you know?
I love it. I love it. And you know what, like to your point too, like I totally agree with you. Like there's so many people right now that have like a main gig, that like a job that they work in, but they have a side hustle. Like I was like following this new account, Side Hustle Market or something like that, on Instagram in Belleville. Like it's a bunch of people with entrepreneurial aspirations, and maybe they already have like a side business, and it's just not big enough to take over their, like, to become their main thing. But it's certainly something that they're like every waking moment, they're not in their day job, they're working on that. So and to your other point, like I think there's a lot of people with entrepreneurial tendencies working like in positions of power within huge organizations, and I think organizations are doing in some capacity, a better job at facilitating flexibility and freedom for those individuals that really thrive. They don't necessarily want the risk all on themselves, but they need the room in order to make things happen. So I totally agree and think, those two things that I just mentioned certainly exist and are frequent. And I would, put that in the class with entrepreneurship for sure.
Mhm. I was I was just preparing to hire some help in our business a while back, and I was sort of looking at who would be a good candidate, who would be a good fit for me. And some of these things are, core values that resonate with me. We want to have somebody who's going to represent those core values. And so I think, that's any business. Can I orientate you to the cause? Um, and being teachable so that you can do that and those kinds of things. But I was sort of, I think before you get to know somebody and before you spend some time with them, those can be challenging things to fish out. um, and so I was listening to some other entrepreneurs and sort of how they choose talent and how they scale their businesses and so on. um, and someone was talking about sort of the A, B, and C entrepreneurs. And so, not exactly as I've described them, but they described, basically varying levels of entrepreneurial skill sets. And they were saying, you have the A entrepreneur who like runs out and starts a business and you can't stop them from starting a business. They're a pure entrepreneur. And then you have that sort of B entrepreneur who, like you said, isn't ready to take the risk or doesn't want to take the risk, but has those entrepreneurial skills. And I would say that my husband is one of those, right? And so I think that as they were describing how they choose to fill these positions, they said, the most valuable player to you is somebody who is the B entrepreneur, somebody who can build and is creative and has vision and, will do all the things that you do, but not want your business. And so I thought that was an interesting perspective because
Very.
I think one of the things that I value the most probably is autonomy. And I think that comes with that type of personality.
Wow, that is really, really great insight. And it's funny that you say that because we just hired somebody here. And I believe like for the time being at this moment in their life, that's where they fit. And yeah, you're 100%. And that's the person you want on your team.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. Corinne, I'm really, really enjoying this conversation. Thank you so much. I wish we could talk longer. It's funny, I'm actually having a job interview at 2 p.m. We are looking to hire again. So we have a few candidates that we're looking at. But I'm going to take that piece of advice you gave into this interview today. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, good for you. And I'm so excited for you as you grow. I think it will be amazing.
And I'm excited for you too. And again, thank you for sharing your wealth of wisdom today. Really, really enjoy your dynamic and just the value that you bring to these conversations. And I'm looking forward to talking more in the future.
I so appreciate that. I don't know if it's a wealth of wisdom, but I'm certainly in a growth process. And, I've benefited from so many other entrepreneurs who are just willing to voice where they're at in their journey. And so I hope, that as others sort of listen and come alongside, that we can work together to build something really excellent.
100%. Corinne, where can people find you quickly if they're looking for you?
Corinne at pushforlife.ca, CORIN at pushforlife.ca, or you can reach out to us through our website at www.pushforlife.ca.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Corinne. Appreciate you.
You take care.
Am I blue? Am I blue? Am I blue? Am I blue?